The dandelion only wants to be the dandelion. It is actually connected and an integral part of the all. Native Americans talk about the original instructions, and those original instructions are what we came in with, and if we would leave ourselves alone, what would emerge out of us authentically and naturally. In terms of healing work, that's what we're coming back to. I understand what the Buddhists are getting at. What they're talking about is a sense that, yes, we're connected to the all, and so if you remove the self, then you just feel the all. But my first Buddhist teacher said, yes, do that for 2 minutes. So you know what it is, so that you know that you're connected, so that you know, so that awareness is always there, and then live your life.
You're an ex-actor, aren't you?
Yeah, I was an actor for the first 35 years. Yeah, that was. But what I found though in the healing work that I do now, it's the same muscles, because if you think of, I was never an actor that was after fame. I was an actor that was interested in artistry. And if you think of, you learn the lines, you learn the blocking, and you hope for inspiration to come through, and it's really not that much different in my healing work. I have my wisdom, and I have my and all of that, and then you hope for higher energies to come through. So it's very similar.
Yeah, because I used to be vaguely involved in sort of the fringes of film and TV and that sort of stuff, but mostly in the corporate side and conferences and all of that. But I worked with a few actors at that level, and one of the things that's interesting there, you're touching on the concept of channeling and the concept of bringing in other energies, both in the artistic work, in the acting, and in the healing work. But how do you want to just explain a little bit more about that for some of my subscribers that aren't really very familiar with this whole kind of channeling, and they certainly don't think that they can do it themselves?
Mm-hmm.
So could you just kind of expand on that a little bit?
If you can just imagine what an actor does. So I see words on a page, and I read them, and I say, what kind of person would say that? What kind of person would say that? What kind of person would act in those ways? And then I empathically attune with whatever the circumstances are and become that from the inside. So when in my healing work, it's very similar. So someone is coming to me and they're telling me their story, and I see how they talk, and I see how they express themselves, and I see what they're leaving out maybe, and I attune to them and say, what kind of person, what's the psychology underneath? So and a lot of times I can tune into, not a lot of times, all the time, I can attune to the unconscious forces that are actually running the outward show, the inward dream of which the outer dream comes forth. And it's just something that I've always been able to do. And so you can think of that as channeling, and also for sure, sort of channeling the unconscious is something I'm very adept at. And then also just a sense of like, what does this person need? And a lot of times I'll say things that I'm not smart enough to know that. I'm not smart enough to guide them in that way. But it's the alchemy of me and the client and all the energies that brought us together that are that I'm able to tune into, that helps bring about what's needed in the moment.
Yeah, very nicely put. Very nicely put. Yeah, sorry, I'm aware that we sort of dived straight into this. I didn't mean to kind of catch you off guard. You're used to it. So the primary work that you do, your book is about shamanism. Remind me what the book's called, and when did you write that?
Shaman's Mind, Huna Wisdom to Change Your Life, and that came out in, I don't know, like 3 years ago. And the reason why I wrote that book, I'd been a shamanic practitioner for many years. I worked with shamans on 3 different continents, and what I found with the Hawaiian tradition was that it was very psychological. It was actually a way in which we can attune our minds to how shamans think. And what I found in working with different shamans in different cultures was that they all, different geographies, different traditions, different practices, but they all tend to think and have the same world view, and the same rapport with energy, the same rapport with love, the same rapport with the directions, with power. And what I found in the Hawaiian tradition was this philosophy that said, oh, this is what they're all thinking, this is what they're all doing. And it was a sort of way into universal shamanic cosmology, from the perspective of psychology, from the perspective of thought. So, the sort of the the hook on my book is that if you want to learn to think like a shaman, follow these seven principles. These seven principles that come from the Hawaiian tradition. They're very simple, but they're deep, and they really do enter you into that magical thinking and that attunement with nature.
Would you say that that attunement with nature is the real fundamental the fundamental thing that is running through all types of shamanism? Is that
It's all
really?
there is. It's all there is. Because nature is, and even when we say nature outside, it's only the European languages that even have a word that is that nature, that thing that is outside, that is separate from us. That's a very Western European concept. Generally speaking, it's more about a dynamic relationship with nature as a being of nature. But we are
Okay.
also, so it's that, but for our healing in the West and to remove the culture, the sick culture from us, it is about our attunement with nature, because nature teaches us how to be. Nature is interconnected, interdependent, it co-evolves together. When there's a lot of diversity, that's actually a healthy ecosystem. Every being in nature wants to grow on its own behalf, wants to grow beyond its current circumstances, and is wildly interested in the things that will help it do that, and wildly distant interested in the things that won't, which are all really good ways for us to live. So nature really shows us how to be. Nature is anti-religion, in that in nature we're not trying to be good, which is we're trying to be true, and in nature everything is true, and authentic to what it is, honoring its own essence.
Love that. I get it. Thank you. That's brilliant. That really is brilliant. Because it is the whole idea of simply just being and being. So when we talk about in human terms, we talk about, well, we're on this path to find ourselves, to find our real truth, to be ourselves, and to be what we believe we are in the world. But actually, what you just summed up was actually that's what nature does anyway. That's what that does. So there's the pattern. There's the template. Follow that.
Yeah, the dandelion only wants to be the dandelion, and in dandelioning, it is actually connected and an integral part of the all. And the Native Americans talk about the original instructions, and those original instructions are what we came in with, and if we would leave ourselves alone, what would emerge out of us authentically and naturally. And that's in terms of healing work, that's what we're coming back to. What were we? I'm big on fate, on the idea of what we are fated. For instance, you didn't choose your skin color, you didn't choose your sex, you didn't choose that family, you didn't choose those circumstances, and yet the Mother Earth created those for you to enter into and to work with those. And then, of course, there are magical practices that are about manifesting on behalf of that self. But finding out who that self is, or that authentic self is a really big part of the work, as is then learning how to advocate energetically on behalf of that self.
Again, wonderfully put. I'm going to stop saying that after every answer that you give. Let's just go up to the higher diving board a second, because I understand what you're saying about nature is giving us the lessons, giving us the template, and our path is all about finding our true selves. I caught some of the interview that you did with Alex Ferrari,
Yeah.
Next Soul Level podcast. You talked in that about the way that we are and we inhabit our own individual reality. That's effectively what you were saying, and this is part of shamanism. And so therefore, if, for example, I sit and talk about the need to connect to nature and the need to connect to the subtle energies through whatever modality it be. And if I cite, well, we need to because nature is lacking, because nature is we're lacking biodiversity, we're exhausting the raw materials, that reflects my reality, doesn't it? That reflects my being at
Mhm.
that point. So the question sort of is, how does that sit with you as a shamanic practitioner? You're aware that your version of nature, of reality, of the isness that in which you exist is a reflection of your inner self. Do you share with me these sort of concepts of lack or low resources and reducing biodiversity, or is that not something that is in your world?
It's absolutely in my world because it's happening. You can think of it two ways. The indigenous mind is uh, is not Buddhist, meaning that it's not just about the unity. It's not just about the no self. So there is a separate self, and there is also a consciousness that is our relation to the all, and we're both. We are both a separate self and a relation to the all. And so, if you can think of each individual human as a kind of cell in and part of a huge organism, and that what our job is individually is to make that cell as healthy and functioning as it can be because its health contributes to the whole organism. So the organism is, there's aspects of the organism that are not well, and that can feel daunting for us, and that can feel like that, you know, humans are a blight on the planet and all of that. Uh, but if we think of it more, that it's just about our individual contribution. There is only ultimately one mind, one consciousness, and our individual consciousness is contributing either positively or negatively to that one consciousness. And then that one consciousness is either in service to health and that which is life affirming and that which is growthful and evolutionary, which of course is anything that has to do with the really basic things like compassion, empathy, care, nurturance, humility, or we're contributing to another force, a very unnatural force, which is very predominant on the planet right now, which is authoritarianism, narcissism, and sociopathy. And those are the two big forces that are happening right now. And so our individual work is simply to attune ourselves and be in accord with what the planet is doing. What is the planet doing? It seems to want to keep going.
Mm.
Seems to it seems to be very interested in growing beyond itself. It's been doing that since its birth 5 billion years ago. And so it seems to want to evolve. It seems to be very interested in that which is life affirming. And so when we align our own consciousness and our own lives and take action in that direction, we become in flow with the all. And when we don't, we're not. And so the illness on the planet right now has to do with because so many people are not. They are out of integrity with themselves, with their own authentic nature, and they have bought this ridiculous idea that we are separate from the planet, that we are the lords of the planet, that nature is simply a storehouse of resources for us, that we are that we are seeking peak humanity, a peak identity that controls and dominates everything, and that we've got it all figured out. We absolutely do not. And so we as humans have to take a step back and say, what are we pursuing right now? Even the idea of sustainability. What are we sustaining? More exploitation? That's the goal, to sustain keeping doing it the same way. And what we have to recognize is that there is, how do we start living from a place of recognizing that everything is sacred, that everything that is alive is sacred. Everything that is alive is sacred. And which is what the indigenous people always felt with the hunter-gatherers, those pre-civilization people, that everything was of great spirit, brother mountain, sister bear, and that we are in relation with those things, and they are not there for us. We are co-creative and in a dynamic, interdependent relationship with them. And when you start doing that, when you start thinking in that way, you start treating humans differently. You start, it's not just about ecology. You start treating yourself in a more loving, empathic way. So that's what we're working toward.
Again, this is the reality that we experience is sometimes referred to as a waking dream. And that reflects a little bit about what we were talking about there, in that the reality is in resonance with our vibration, our co-creative ability to sit
Yeah,
with it.
the easiest way to understand that, if you think of a sleeping dream, the easiest way to interpret a sleeping dream is that everything in the dream, the people, places, and things in the dream, are a reflection of something about us. And so if you think of that, how shamans think of reality, waking reality, as a waking dream, that everything we experience in our world, the people, places, and things in our waking reality, is a reflection of something about us. That the inner dream, our individual inner dream, is creating the outer dream. And so, and that's sort of the first principle of Huna, which says that the world is, or the world becomes, what you think about, both consciously and unconsciously. And that's what we are doing based on what we're cultivating inwardly. So I often give the example that if you want to take a walk in the forest and have the forest give you a message about a certain issue in your life, then you have to enter into the reality that the forest can do that. Otherwise, it's a walk in the forest, which is fine. But when we start entertaining the idea that we believe in certain realities that, again, are life affirming and growthful and imaginative and helpful, then we start entering into a world where we experience those things in that way.
I'm reminded actually when you talk there about going into the forest and having getting the response that you expect. I'm reminded of when fairly early in my journey, I used to visit a lot of Neolithic standing stones, so stone circles, which of course were, your classic sacred site. And I would always enter them with the expectation that something mind-boggling is going to happen. And, I would get messages as clear as the day. And, I know for a fact that if I hadn't have walked in there with such an open attitude and an expectation that something great was going to happen, I wouldn't have got those messages. It would have just been, there's a whole load of stones around here. So it's exactly that case in point.
That's right. And sometimes, and here's the thing, sometimes they don't. And that needs to be part of your process too. That's okay. And because it's not all, for the spirits, the energy to actually create phenomenological effects, it takes a lot of juice for them to do that. They'd rather we just know that they're there.
Right.
And so when we are lucky enough to have those experiences where we say that is certainly any synchronicity is that, but when we have that feeling of there's something there that is speaking to me, that's such a gift. But the idea is ultimately that we all recognize that that's happening regardless. There is another energetic, unconscious story that is always a part of our lives.
Yeah, it's always there, irrespective of. So the wow moments that we can get on the spiritual journey, they're really just the signposts to say, right, come on, guys, you're on the right track and keep going. And then they tend to sort of die down, don't they? Those big wows. I bet you've had a million of them.
I've had a million of them, but those peak experiences, I see this a lot with people who are really earnestly on trying to live a spiritual life, is that early on they get those peak experiences and they then forget. I'm reminded of a peak experience I remember having in my 20s in Sedona, just on a mountain, and I sort of had this moment where I felt like I was with it and it was with me, and I went to a hypnotist that night and said, could you hypnotize this reality that I just experienced into me because I don't want to forget it? And the hypnotist said, I'm not going to do that. And then she said, what you need to do is choose that reality again. Remember it. Even a lot of times people say to me, what do you do with that altar, that big fancy altar back there? What do you do with that? And my answer is not a whole lot. except that every time I look at it, it reminds me of a reality that is my reality and is a reality that's a better one than having that altar not be there.
Excellent. So you had spiritual beliefs in your right from your younger days, from the you said there Sedona in your 20s, or
No, I wasn't at all. In fact, I would say I'm pretty unhappy. I remember being in an airport when I was like 20 years old. You know, they have those airport bookstores, and there was a book. I don't know whatever became of this book, but the book was entitled "Feeling Good." It was in the self-help section,
yeah,
and I thought, now that's an idea. What would that be like? I remember nothing about the book, but I remember being very taken about the idea that feeling good was possible. So, I'm a wounded healer.
yeah.
I think like so many of us are. I certainly had a belief in. I was very imaginative. I certainly believed in a magical world. I think that was a lot of what my parents were picking up on when they said actor, because I was a mimic, and and I could fantasize about other realities, and I was very very much in stories. But actually, consciously spiritual, it came about out of a genuine need to heal, and to find my own spirit, and to find my own relationship with spirit. And then, so it was really just for me. And then what became clear was that I became interested in the earth-based traditions because they were about living here well. There's a lot of juice right now, or a lot of airtime around post-apocalyptic consciousness off this planet. Even supernatural, meaning that the natural is deanimated, not very interesting, but that which is supernatural, that which is off the planet, is what is interesting spiritually. And that's kind of Christian. That's just an off-planet God. That's just a different version of an off-planet God, as opposed to the enchanting energies that are right here, and that are contribute to our magic right here. And that became a very important aspect of my work. To bring spirituality here, and not into some other realm, even some other realm in my mind. It's here. When,
Right.
when I talk about spiritual practice, it's with the eyes open, not with the eyes closed. And I'm not looking to go anywhere. I'm looking to become more here.
Interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. So incredibly grounded, and very much. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so we can't deny that a lot of people are waking up now. Around the world, there's like this massive wave, and it's wonderful, fantastic, marvelous. There, it can be a bit of a shock the way that some people are sort of blasted open. It's almost like they haven't been listening, and then something happens that goes blam. You've got to listen, and they can get very rocked. Are you coming across a lot of people in your practice that are actually getting these sort of spiritual awakenings that are a bit like being blasted, and they're getting unsettled? Excuse me, unsettled in their realities.
But absolutely, absolutely. If you can just think that we are, you hear that bumper sticker that we are born for these times. We really are. If we have incarnated to be alive right now, where there is a great shift, we are in, not to be too depressing, we are in an extinction event, the Anthropocene extinction. That is happening. It's not going to happen probably within our lifetimes, but we are in a major, major shift. I hope that we can turn it around, or make it a very thin layer in the geological history, but it's absolutely happening. We are recognizing that we can't keep doing it the way we're doing it. And everyone has an individual experience of that. Not everyone, so many people are married to a culture that is perfectly happy with enslaving them, with getting them to follow their rules, getting them to live a life where you send the money up. The architects of reality have been quite nefarious in the way in which they have indoctrinated us all into following a culture where we are obedient to it. And so The wake up, the slap upside of the head is about is our own individual spirit saying, you're not going to get where you want to go doing that, and you're not going to find yourself doing that. Very very simple example. If your dharma, your really life's goal, your purpose is to go open a bed and breakfast in Costa Rica, the culture isn't going to tell you that there's a possibility that that could ever happen. Anyone who does do that, it's because they have followed something inwardly within themselves, said essentially, screw you culture, screw you rules, screw you family expectations, this is what I'm going to go do. So when I talk about culture, I'm not just talking about CNN and that kind of culture and the capitalism. I'm talking about family culture, about anything that blocks us from our liberation. That's what we're removing in our healing. And so when people get slapped upside the head, it's because they're waking up to a sense of I can't keep doing it like this. And COVID was huge with that. COVID to me was very much which goes along with Tibetan medicine and a lot of other things. COVID was a spirit, and it came in and it was either gonna kill you or it was gonna rebirth you, and it did that for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a different. I mean, I'm either very naive or I'm incredibly optimistic, because I do feel as though we were sort of, I know we're on the corner, we're kind of turning a corner, and there's this, it's really a significant time, and it's so important that we all do our bit. But I do feel like, yeah, we're going to be all right. Humanity as a concept is going to be all right. The Earth would always be fine if we consider it's the lump of rock hurtling through space. I mean, it'll regrow and do whatever it likes, whether we're here or not. That's what, fundamentally. But I do think that there's an optimism there. But of course, we can't rest on our laurels at all, because we're nowhere near having achieved it. Now, I'm still drawn back to this, the way that reality reflects the inner self. And for those people that are watching that are, not lucky enough. I mean, you're in delightful Maui. It's not somewhere where I've ever visited as yet, but I'm lucky enough to live in a national park in the UK, in the Yorkshire Dales, and literally, I mean, it's just, beautiful isolation. So we're really lucky to be able to see the natural world reflecting aspects of things. A lot of our viewers are living in urban centres, and they've got parks, sure, and they've got trees and all the rest of it. But what would you say to somebody, or what do you say to people that live in urban spaces? How do they connect to that calming influence of well, we have to say it as a separate entity, the natural world?
I think that the natural world is not necessarily calming. It's directive. And so if we can think of, even if we are in urban spaces, as a sense of what am I believing about myself? What am I believing about my relationship to the world, my individual relationship to the world? What is my worldview? And if that material is limiting, if that material is not very nice, if that material is riddled with, frankly, low self-esteem, then that is going to be what you a large part of what you're creating in terms of your own individual life. So if everyone whether or not you're directly connected to nature or not, and just to say that even that is absurd, because you are a being of nature no matter where you are, but if you can think that is what I'm thinking right now, is what coming up on my screen of awareness, is it growthful? Is it helpful? Is it going to get me where I want to go? Is there possibility in it? Is there movement in it? And if there isn't, it's not a true voice. It's not a true voice, because that voice doesn't exist in nature. Everything in nature is growthful and has movement in it and is in process. And when we organize ourselves and our relationship to the world as this is what it is, this is my I'm screwed paradigm, this is my I'm stuck paradigm that I believe, and I believe to such an extent that I don't examine it, and I even finance and give clout to it, then that's going to be your world. But you are basing your reality not on a true voice. Not every voice in our head is a true voice. And the one that is hypercritical, what Freud called the superego, the one that assimilates with the sick culture that I'm telling you about, that we're talking about, and so therefore terrorizes you to not move, grow, create, love, self and other. That's the voice that's got to go. And when we tune into nature, we go, that voice isn't there. That's what we learn from nature.
So what changed your life then, Jonathan? What changed you from being a slightly rather unhappy 20-year-old into this person that sits in front of me today?
Well, healing is real. I think we have to say that out loud. It actually is a thing that can happen where we can, with work, enter into new paradigms of consciousness and realities within ourselves where things are better. And I have seen that in myself, and I've seen that in others. And the spirits, the spirits that hover around the planet that just want to help, that's what they want to help us with. They want to, because when we're that, we are co-evolving in dynamic relationship with ecology, because that's what ecology is doing. So it's that I recognize that healing is real, that you can actually let go of things. In shamanic work, we talk about extractions. So the idea that something has been introjected into me, there's an intrusion into me, someone's belief about me, the way in which I was treated, some trauma, something that I then form a sense of self around, and in shamanic work, we get that out. We actually extract that out. That's a thing. We cut cords with the things that we are connected to that are not helping us get us where we want to go. And it is about removing that stuff, and we really can do that. Now, we have an unconscious mind that is habituated toward the false self, whatever the false self is, that we have to keep working on, because it's not just about extracting it. It's also about extracting it and being in rapport with ourselves to be this new person without that thing that we've extracted. That's the part of the healing process. But that is the process. And we can all do that. We're all supposed to do that.
So there's this term, isn't there, subjugating the ego, where we're saying, right, well, we're living on a different level now. We're not paying attention to all of that stuff. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's about changing. But the ego is there for a reason. The ego is there as part of our humanness. So do we actually just address ego and say,
yes,
okay,
we got to judge the ego. Meaning that it's yes, we have an ego, and if our ego is who we think we are, and if I don't know that I'm a spiritual teacher, we're not going to have this conversation. My ego has now identified and connected with Jonathan as spiritual teacher, and that's why I'm here. Even the goal of the East of yoga meditation is no self, and from where I sit, women, minorities, alternative, gay people, we need more ego. We need more self, not less self. When you think of anyone who's oppressed, and so So I understand what they're getting at, what the Buddhists are getting at. What they're talking about is a sense that, yes, we're connected to the all. And so if you remove the self, then you just feel the all. But my first Buddhist teacher said, yes, do that for 2 minutes. So you know what it is, so that you know that you're connected, so that awareness is always there. And then live your life. Live your life with that. You have that empathic awareness that you are part of the all. But at the same time, who are you? I'm wildly interested in who you are authentically. Who I am authentically is what has emerged as spiritual teacher, and I have to own, my ego has to own that.
I mean, you've trained in a lot of modalities to become this spiritual teacher. So this path that you've trod, did you do that out? What drove you to those teachings? What gave you the urge? I've got to learn that, or did it just come to you? I mean, I don't mean the learning. I mean, did the opportunity just arrive?
No, I think I'm a Virgo. I think I just God is in the details. I just think I just what I have found in my own life is that, well, one thing, just universal truth: avoidance sucks. Avoidance is the worst, and I think it's so important that we leave no stone unturned in our development, in our sense of who we are. We all have a shadow. We all have aspects of us that we're not crazy about. We all have whatever, and to address that and to be in rapport with that, to tell the truth, for goodness sake, to really tell the truth and to actually seek truth. There is such a thing as truth, even in this world right now where truth is up for grabs. There is a truth, and truth is a felt experience. And you have to be self-esteemed and content with yourself and in your own power to actually feel that in yourself. Have a rapport with the felt experience of truth. And that's work. And it's satisfying. But it also is about that you don't really get away with a whole lot, but one of my favorite spiritual teachers, she says, she was asked about what the best diet is, and she said, eat cat food. I don't care, just tell the truth. If you eat cat food, you're going to be fine as long as you're telling the truth. And so that's just been something that I'm very interested in. And the Lahaina fires, I live on Maui, the Lahaina fires just happened. And the next day, rather than mourning, rather than conversations about climate change, that did sort of happen, rather than conversations about the Hawaiian indigenous culture and the way in which it is being undermined and historically and otherwise, it's conversations about Chinese laser beams and government conspiracies and all, and there's so much interest in pulling us away from that felt sense of truth. And the Lahaina fires were about fire and air and burning the original Hawaiian kingdom to the ground to say that the Hawaiian indigenous culture is not an artifact behind glass, as it is in that town, in the museums. It needs to be released and lived, and we need to start over.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The clearing power of fire. Amazing. Same with water and what have you. So, tell us about your work, though. What is it that you do with people? You do various aspects of work. One of the things that I've noticed on your website is you do what you call men's work. Tell me about that just briefly, and then about some of the other modalities that you go through with people.
Well, when we talk about the sick culture that teaches us things that aren't true, men are really, women are certainly the sort of victims of that, but men are too. And there is a sense of what a man is, what a man should be, that doesn't allow a man to actually be a truly loving, empathic agent in the world. They're just supposed to be this superhero machine, unfeeling, robotic, dominating, etc. And so what I found in just working with so many men is that that no one taught them. No one taught them anything different. Men's work, as we understand it in the consciousness culture, is 1995, where we started talking about men a little bit differently, and what the true essence of masculinity is, which is to be soft and feminine enough in order to give your gift, in order to actually expand the other. But how I expand the other is based on how sensitive and aware I am about what needs expansion. And that's not something that men have been indoctrinated into being takers, not givers, even though we have the equipment to give, the physical equipment to give. And so recalibrating that. And women then need work about, if there is that kind of guy who is going to, guy, masculine, these gender things are, they are what they are. But if there is that kind of a person who wants to give the gift of their awareness empathically, that I, as the feminine, have the self-esteem to receive it and know that I deserve it. And so it's about upping our care and awareness of each other, and getting out of these patterns of, if you think of masculine archetypes, it's kind of like, the bad boy, the asshole CEO, the dweeb, the soft man. These are what men have to choose from. They're not great choices. So that's just something that has come up in my work, and then I just began really endeavoring to understand, what are my men suffering with? What are they? Men don't have a good rapport with their pain. I'm not supposed to feel this feeling. I'm not supposed to be feeling this. Well, yes, you are. So it's that. It's that.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully some of our viewers will pick up on that. And some of the other aspects that you do, spiritual counseling. You're also an ordained minister, aren't you? Is that right, or have I got that slightly wrong?
Yeah. Years ago, I went to seminary for a couple of years, interfaith seminary, and that actually introduced me to. So I looked at all the different major faith paths, and that was actually what led me to Earth Wisdom. That was one module, and that was the one that resonated. But yeah, I've been at it a long time. And spiritual counseling is just it's mostly the work that I do, and it's about that there is a spiritual context that is happening within our lives, and we are co-creating with who we are, the energies that we came from, and the energies that help us become more of who we are. And so spiritual counseling is about being in that process together, and being in relationship with someone who is holding the client's highest potential, holding the reality of where the client is, holding the sense that to get from here to there, you're going to need faith. Which is what I don't understand about contemporary clinical psychology is faith isn't the thing. I don't know how you get from here to there without faith. I don't know, but and so it's that work. It's about recognizing that there is a spiritual and evolutionary story that is happening in addition to our lived story here, and that they go together, and that they are not separate. So that's the essence of spiritual counseling.
Excellent. And where do people find you? Where's the best place for you?
JonathanHammond.com. If you put in Jonathan, not that I call myself this, but if Jonathan Shaman Maui, I'm going to come up. But JonathanHammond.com is the easiest way to find me.
Okay, well, we'll pop that beneath the thing so people can dig you out. And your book is The Shaman's Mind, Who Knew Wisdom to Change Your Life. Available at all good bookshops, as they say.
And I have classes coming up too that are on my website. Class based on that book. I have a Shift Network course, which the ink isn't even dry in terms of it hasn't even been announced yet, but that's going to happen in September. So your Glidewing course is actually May the 18th, and I'm not sure when this one's going to go out. It may be in time for that, but I think we might have just missed the boat. But good.
Do they come around again? Do you do that? I don't know how that works.
That course runs about 3 times a year, so that'll
okay, cool. Yeah.
So I have a mailing list on my website, and that'll keep you connected.
So, is there anything else that you want to say that you feel you haven't covered that our subscribers might kind of pick up on?
I think recognize that there are 2 major forces happening right now: forces toward freedom and liberation and health, and forces that have to do with domination and selfishness and taking. Decide what side you're on. There are sides, and give your love and attention to strengthening If you're on the side of freedom, strengthening that side, both within yourself and helping others to do the same. So that's the main thing I would say. It's that simple. Clean up your individual cell as part of the whole organism. Make it as healthy as you can. And you do that mainly through love and self-investment.
Right. Lovely. Thank you very much. Good man. Good man. Great. Thank you, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Lovely stuff. Maybe one day we can have you back again and hear some more. You're not, just out of interest, you're not working on another book, are you? Or is that too takes?
The book will happen based on that next course. My last
okay.
Based on a course, and it'll be based on that course. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, when you've got that closer to publication, come back and give us a shout. That'd be lovely. All right. Enjoy Hawaii.
Thank
and
you.
have a lovely day. Take care.
Aloha. Thank you.
Bye-bye.